The House settlement is approved. It could be great for college football. I'm not just talking about the Big Ten and SEC.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest, craziest sport on planet Earth. Houston's keeping its five-star quarterback around. That's big news. Will the playoff ever actually be equal? That is all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, a sneaky little news dump over the weekend that was kind of just thrown in, and here you go. The House settlement finally gets approved. Judge Claudia Wilken, that's a name that is forever going to be tied to landmark moments in the history of college athletics, approves the House settlement. There's $2.8 billion in back payments to athletes who should have been able to get money but weren't allowed to because NIL wasn't a thing. Now schools are going to pay up to $20.5 million to their athletes this year with money generated by their athletic department. That's just money in the athletic department that goes straight, not from an NIL collective. I'll get to that more later. This could be great for college football because you are never, I don't think you could form any sort of body, commission, form regulation. You could do anything. You're never going to operate on equal playing field. Professional sports have salary caps, and it's not an equal playing field. You don't have the same financial resources and pitch to free agents with the Arizona Cardinals facility that you do for, I don't know, probably what the Kansas City Chiefs have. Those sorts of things aren't exactly the same. The way money gets spent from ownership isn't exactly the same. But the NFL is close, and the NFL is, of course, the king of parity. That's been their whole shtick for a long time. Part of that, not all of it, but a big part of that is that financially they're on a very similar playing field. There's a salary cap. They all get the same amount from their media rights revenue, even though I bet you some brands, the Cowboys, are worth more than others. And of course, the Cowboys have plenty of money, right? So the idea of setting a cap on how much schools can spend absolutely can bring the Big 12 and ACC closer financially to where the Big 10 and SEC are at. It doesn't mean automatically every Big 12 school is going to be able to just go, full-fledged, full court press up to $20.5 million right away. Some schools are probably going to get to that number quicker. How they distribute that money remains to be seen. Some want it to be proportional to the revenue generated by each sport, which means 85 or 90% might be going to football and 10% elsewhere. Some places want to go 75% to football, 15% to basketball, to men's basketball, 5% to women's basketball, 5% everywhere else. This is a Locked On College Football show. I am very glad that is the case today because this is a great move for football. It might not be so great for many other sports. I don't have time to dwell on that right now because we have a model here at the network of about 30-minute shows. So the situation for football could improve. I want to emphasize the could. I want to be optimistic. I feel good about this overall. This does work to level the playing field. Contingent upon what happens with the NIL collectives. So the attempt, and a number of places have reported this. I was reading Brandon Marcello over at CBS Sports the other day. The revenue sharing comes from money generated or that exists within the athletic department and is up to around $20.5 million this year. And the most expensive college football rosters are expected to cost more than that because you have hungover NIL deals and payments from the structure before this all got implemented. But the NIL component of this new settlement and this new college football commission that will have an enforcement arm, if it holds up to legal scrutiny, of course, is really the key component because that would, in essence, nullify the effect of collectives and further close the gap between the haves and the have-nots in college sports. Because then what you would have, again, schools that have more money, that are willing to invest, that are willing to fundraise, that find wealthy donors, they're still going to benefit more than places that aren't able to come up with money that quickly. This would be, in my view, a significant step towards leveling that gap, because the College Football Commission, in partnership with one of the big four accounting firms, Deloitte, will be able to regulate NIL. They're calling it NIL Go, or something in that nature. Like, they're trying to mitigate what has been referred to negatively as quote unquote pay for play, which is, I will pay. It is what it is. It just has such a dirty connotation, but what it has been is the Wild West. And the Wild West said, hey, I'll pay you any amount of money that, we're willing to pay. And there's no restriction on how much I can give you. And I am an NIL collective separate from the athletic department. So it's not the school paying you directly, which they can't do. Now they can, of course, under the settlement. And so collectives were brokering these huge deals. And a bunch of these deals got done under this deadline. They got done beforehand because everyone knew this was coming, and the deals that had been worth so much money to both the athletes and people surrounding the athletes, agents, parents, and the like, were not going to be allowed automatically. Now, we don't have a great understanding, because there's no precedent for any of this, of how the NIL Commission arm of this new College Football Commission is going to actually operate, because they have the ability to review any deal between a third party and a student athlete that is worth $600 or more. Newsflash, you can go down to the low major level and find NIL deals worth more than $600. So that's going to be a lot of work for somebody, but the idea that they're going to come in and just automatically be able to say, we don't feel, I'm just going to say a hypothetical here. I don't want Miami fans jumping down my throats. I'm just laying out a hypothetical, okay? Let's say Carson Beck's NIL deal to go to Miami was $4 million. In this new world, that arrangement is not just allowed to happen so long as the collective and Carson Beck agree to it. And, I'm sure Mario Cristobal would have some input there. This NIL Go Commission would be able to assess, is $4 million what we deem to be fair market value for Carson Beck? And if they say no, that deal doesn't happen. Doesn't mean he wouldn't still go to the school or get some extra NIL money aside from the revenue sharing that comes from the athletic department. But it does mean that throwing an infinite amount of money, essentially, or just outbidding other schools for players, they're trying to work against that. The roadblock that could hit is legally, because what the courts have said in a number of occasions is that the NCAA capping the earning potential of student athletes who are legal adults, they can vote, they can be in the military, they can do all of these adult things, they've got to pay taxes, all of it, right? Capping their earning potential has proved difficult legally. Now, whether that ends up working out here is a huge development on how much this gap levels between the richest schools in college football and the ones that are just trying to keep up, which from a conference standpoint is really the Big Ten and the SEC versus the Big 12 and the ACC. So if you're a Big 12 or ACC fan and you have lamented fairly that the Big Ten and SEC have grown all powerful and the money's a big reason behind it, this is a significant step towards leveling the playing field. It's not going to be perfectly level. You're never going to get there. Okay? But what you're trying to get to is better than the current situation. I think this is a step in that direction, because you set a salary cap, and I'm sure it'll change throughout the years just like it does in the NFL. It's $20.5 million this year. That's the most any school can pay. So SMU, which you better believe has $20 million, will have the same amount of money to pay its student athletes for the college football calendar and the rest of the sports for just the college calendar 2025, 2026. They'll have the same amount they can allocate from their department as Alabama, as Georgia, as Florida, as Oregon State. keep going down the list. It'll all be the same maximum. The question is, what will the NIL collectives be able to do, and how does that impact the financial landscape? So a great first step, Claudia Wilken, remember the name, big time ruling here. She just kind of dropped it on everybody as we went into the weekend. But hey, I got to talk about something on Monday, so here we are. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. We're talking actual football. Crazy concept, I know. Big news out of Houston on the recruiting front. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments like every Tyrese Halliburton late-game situation. Whether it's a game-winning shot, Tyrese Halliburton, or a breakout player, Tyrese Halliburton, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you wanted to bet on college football, you can do that too. We are less than 3 months away. We're in the 2.5 month range to an actual college football game that matters for 2025. If you want to bet on that, if you want to bet on anything else related to the greatest sport on planet Earth, you can do that over at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's a great deal. So go check them out. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Big news in Cougar country. 5-star quarterback Keisan Henderson has shut it down. It's over. Like Vince Carter at the dunk contest, it's over. Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs is here to discuss. It wasn't just big news that Houston was in the running for Keisan Henderson. It was even bigger news when he committed to Houston, Parker. And now he comes out right as official visit season is starting to ramp up for literally everybody across the country. And he says, yeah, I was going to visit Florida State this week. They won a national championship like 11 years ago. And no, not doing that anymore. We're going to stick with the Houston Cougars here. So Keisan Henderson is locked in. Let's talk about the impact before we talk about the player. How big is this for Willie Fritz and company?
Huge. Cannot discuss how big it is really, because it's 5-star. At one point was the number one kid in Texas, number one athlete in Texas. And you mentioned Willie Fritz, and obviously Houston being hometown plays a big role here. But Willie Fritz specifically coached Michael Bishop, who is Keisan Henderson's head high school football coach in college, in junior college, and built this relationship. And it speaks highly of that. It does all these different layers to it. A big week and weekend for the Houston Cougars.
Yeah, and this is a name that I think when he first committed to Houston, I'm sure there were plenty of people out there. I bet you could troll some YouTube commenters if you wanted to at this point in time, who probably thought, perhaps not unfairly, he's not sticking with Houston. He's going to visit Florida State. He's going to visit another school. He's not going to stick with the Big 12 Cougars, who have been a Big 12 team for about an hour. Because don't forget, Parker, the narrative, which has plenty of data behind it, is that 5-star recruits don't go to the Big 12. And here Willie Fritz is in year 2. I understand there's a hometown connection there. This is still an impressive poll. I mean, certainly there's a benefit, but you use anything you can in your favor on the recruiting trail. You do whatever you have to do. And the fact that Willie Fritz got this done and he now projects as the Cougars quarterback of the future, massive stuff going into year 2.
Yeah, Houston was in early and told him he could play quarterback when he was listed as an athlete. That was a big deal. And I mentioned Michael Bishop earlier. Michael Bishop, for very different reasons, in his time period, was told he couldn't play quarterback either. Fritz told him he could at junior college, and so on. So he wanted to be an all everything Hall of Famer at Kansas State. Now insert Keisan Henderson. He's an athlete. People tell me he can't play quarterback. Willie Fritz says he can. And at the time, they're like, okay, this is just he's trying to tell the world he's a quarterback, and Houston offered him as a quarterback. So everyone nationally was like, this is just him making a signal or some sort of a play like you're talking about. And he's very firm, no, this is not that kind of a mark. This is not that kind of a move. He's sticking with the Cougars. He's not visiting anybody else. And the timing of it, Spencer, you cover national college football stories. The timing of it's so important for this.
Yeah, it is, because this is the time of year where kids go on visits and, yeah, I'm going to back off of that commitment that I made a few weeks ago. Or, yeah, I've been committed to this school for, almost a year now for, there are plenty of kids. I mean, schools have already gotten started on their class of 2027 recruiting, and that starts right now. You can have those guys that say, I want to go through official visit season without having the, kind of tag of, he's already committed elsewhere. I want to go into it with an open mind. I want to give these schools an open chance. For him to shut it down right now is just huge, and I think speaks volumes to the job that Willie Fritz has done so far, the job he can continue to do. I always like the hire of Willie Fritz from Tulane, because I talk about Tulane on this show plenty, Parker, especially in the realignment space, as could they wind up in the Pac-12 one day? They'd be a prime target if they were not already in the American Conference, probably. But the reason that they are seen as that sort of school, that they have premier G5 brand power, not quite on Boise State's level. Nobody's there because they're the original Cinderella. Right. The reason they're in that same discussion, the reason people see them that way, is Willie Fritz. This wasn't a Tulane program that was, competing with Boise to be the best Group of 5 team in the country every year. No, he built them up. So I always like that hire. And I think this is just another step towards, Willie Fritz proving to the Houston fan base, I can win here at a high level.
Yeah, and you mentioned that he built up Tulane. It really started more like 8 years in the making before he kind of hit the national level. Getting a 5-star prospect that plays quarterback would obviously be a pretty big deal there as far as fast-forwarding that timeline with the University of Houston. Tulane bluntly has some barriers in the way as far as who can get in, who can't get in, and whatever that other schools like Houston don't have. And then you also enter NIL space and all that, and the house settlement that you opened with, and all those things too. Keisan specifically is this charismatic guy that wears the raccoon skin cap to 7-on-7, and he gets the MVP trophy at the Navy All-American game with that on his head as well. He's already out recruiting people online. Davian Gross is a guy that a 4-star wide receiver that took a visit to Oklahoma, and he's posting pictures from Oklahoma over the weekend, and Keisan Henderson's retweeting with but go Cougs, right? This guy's already in it. He's recruiter number 1 for the season, for the off season right now. Big deal on all of those fronts. And it also, Willie Fritz, I think people worried about does he have time for a long rebuild because he is a little bit older guy. No one hated to hire from an X and O's or a culture standpoint, like you said. And this certainly fast forwards all that in a way that I think puts them silencing on all those problems too.
Let's talk about the player himself. You mentioned that, not every school necessarily wanted him to play quarterback or was going to let him do that because he's incredibly athletic, but he's maybe not the world's most refined passer. What type of player do you think steps foot on campus next year? I presume, correct me if I'm wrong, he's an early enrollee and plays in the spring game next year for the Cougs.
Yeah, I'd imagine so too. And full disclosure, after his sophomore year, I thought he was going to be the kind of kid that had the Ryan Tannehill kind of program. You show up a receiver for a year or two and then move into quarterback. And then his junior quarterback season was tremendous. He threw for over 3,000 yards, had 30 touchdowns. I mean, really impressive at the Texas high school football. He's not playing at a big high school, but at the Texas high school football level. Obviously had his rushing touchdowns and stuff too. He's an electric athlete. I think the deal that is impressive, though, when you talk to him, or our buddy, our mutual friend, Brian Smith, has talked to him in person, he's really, really smart and understands the IQ stuff of the game, right? And that comes from working with Bishop so closely. That comes from being a football junkie at an early age. And so it's more about fine-tuning some mechanics and stuff like that. He understands the game at a high-level, quarterback level, and that's a big deal for guys that are athletes playing quarterback. And I will say, I always liked a fast quarterback, though, Spencer. No, your opinion on it. I don't want my quarterback to get a touch ball every play that the defense is trying to kill to be slow. I never really understood why.
Well, I don't want him to be slow. I just, I don't want him to be a statue back there. I think we've moved on from those days where a guy, is Phillip Rivers running in the pocket. That's not anybody's
Did
desired
you see if there's
quarterback.
another Phillip Rivers going on visits, like a junior or a second or one of his 27 kids or whatever?
Okay, I know you have like actual reason to feel old because you've got like, kids and responsibilities and stuff. I don't want to feel closer to that, so we're not going to discuss some Phillip Rivers Jr. nonsense on the show. We're not going in that particular direction. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs, great as always. I have another question about this whole playoff, or one of you rather has a question that I was thinking about. Will it ever actually be equal? All right, let's go back to the big picture here, because I got a question from one of you out there. You can send me a question. I might answer it. I might not. Depends on if it's a good question. You send me a good, solid question, though. I like seeing where you guys' heads are at. Then you can see where my head is at in response to where your head is at and all that good stuff. Would love to get your thoughts on a 2-2, 2-2-1 plus a second G5 playoff school if in the top 25 next 7/8. Teams that play in a Power 4 conference championship are automatically qualified, rewards regular season play, but flexibility to add best teams regardless of conference. This will hear me and hear me now. Dave Chappelle had this great bit. He has a lot of great bits. He's very funny. I'm a big stand-up comedy fan. Dave Chappelle is one of my favorites. Here's this great bit. He's telling a story about a night he bombed in Detroit. And as he tells the story, he realized that he wasn't doing any well and people were heckling him. And they started chanting, "We want our money back." And he snapped out of it and he said, "People of Detroit, hear me and hear me now. You will never get your money back." This is how I feel about a 2-2, 2-2-1, and a second G5 if it's in the top 25 format. You're never getting it. You can keep dreaming. And you know what? Some of us have to be dreamers. Somebody's got to be optimistic in this world. The Big Ten and SEC, I don't know how much say they actually have in this whole house settlement because, as I talked about earlier, it doesn't allow them to pull away from everyone else as they have been for the last year and a half or so financially. It actually makes things a bit more equitable, makes things a bit more feasible for the other schools to compete financially to put rosters together. But that is separate from the construction of the playoff. Claudia Wilken is not coming down with another ruling next month and saying, by the way, Big Ten and SEC, you have to have the same number of teams in the playoff as the Big 12 or the ACC. You will never get that. You'll never get that. And by the way, I do fully admit my Dave Chappelle impression, average. It's average. It's not below average, but it's not top tier, and I'm okay with that. But the ability for Judge Wilken to influence college sports this way is unique to the financial component because that applies beyond the playoff. The playoff itself is still going to be done at the behest of the Big Ten and SEC. Now, everybody has their own thoughts on the 5+11 format versus the 4-4, 2-2-1 plus 3, and all these different scenarios and such. And I shared extensive thoughts on that last week on the show if you want to hear. But, in short, my thoughts are I like 5+11 more. I like the uncertainty. I don't want teams to get to rivalry week and have those games, not matter because they've already automatically qualified with where they're at in the conference standings. I don't like that particular idea. And I also don't like a guaranteed 4 auto bids for the Big Ten and SEC because some years, they'll have more than that. But you'll guarantee they get years with 5 or 6 teams more often if you say their floor is 4. Because I look back at the last 5 years of the playoff, their floor is 3. You will have seasons, if history repeats itself, as it often does, where you might only get 3 SEC teams into the playoff. So I like to allow for that possibility. Not everybody sees it that way. But the idea that you're going to one day have the Big Ten or SEC agree to not just have the same number of automatic bids as the Big 12 and ACC each, but potentially as the group of 5 if a second G5 team's in the top 25. Like last year, if UNLV wins the Mountain West championship game against Boise State, Boise would still be ranked. UNLV would be ranked ahead of them. They'd both be in the top 25. Both of those teams get in, but Alabama has to wait and see and be at the whim of the commit. Yeah, Greg's saying he's not going to let that happen. It just isn't going to happen. So I'd love for it. Frankly, I would love for no automatic qualifiers beyond the conference champions, because that adds the maximum urgency to conference championship games, which I think are really fun. And it's, half an olive branch to TV executives. But quite frankly, I've always seen conference title games as an extension of the regular season personally. So those having the maximum importance of, hey, win and you're in no matter what your record is. Yeah, I'm okay with that. And then I'd like to have everything else being at large. But hey, that's just me. That's just me and the way that I roll. But I understand, listener or watcher of the show out there, where your head is coming from. I understand the optimism. Just know you're never going to get there. Let's take the wins where we can get them and call it a day. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.